Have you ever wondered why people can talk about protecting the earth all day, then still live like the earth is a disposable background stage? Have you ever noticed that the moment you slow down and actually feel the living world, your choices start changing without anyone forcing you? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are stepping into a story that links two worlds many people still keep separate in their minds. The inner world of practice and the outer world of nature. Buddhism and the environment. Not as a trend, not as an argument, and not as a performance of moral purity, but as a real-life path that asks a single uncomfortable question. If practice is about reducing suffering, what does practice look like when suffering includes polluted air, exhausted forests, broken water cycles, disappearing species, and communities living under pressure they did not create? I want to hold two main threads in our hands while we walk. First, environmental harm is not only a policy problem or a technology problem. It is also a mind habit problem. Because a distracted and craving mind will keep producing the same harms even if you swap one gadget for another. Second, environmental healing becomes possible when compassion becomes ordinary, meaning it enters your daily habits without drama, because dramatic care often burns out, while ordinary care becomes culture, and culture becomes the future. Let me start with a scene that is painfully modern. A person wakes up and immediately touches a screen. The day rushes in like a crowd. Messages, headlines, reminders, comparison, and a constant background hum that says you are behind. The mind becomes tight before breakfast. By the time the person steps outside, the sky is just a color. The trees are just decoration, and the birds are just noise. The person does not hate nature. The person simply does not meet nature. Not really. They pass through the world like a visitor in a hotel corridor. Then later that same person sees a video about climate change or species loss. The mind feels a sting of guilt, then a wave of helplessness. The mind says it is too big. The mind says, what can I do? The mind says, I am just one person. Then the mind protects itself the way minds often do. It numbs out and returns to distraction. This is one of the hidden tragedies of our era. Many people do care, but their care does not have a stable channel. It becomes either anxiety that collapses into numbness, or anger that collapses into hatred, or guilt that collapses into shame. None of these states are sustainable. And when care is not sustainable, harm continues. Buddhist practice offers something very different. It does not start by asking you to fix the whole planet. It starts by asking you to see clearly. It starts by asking you to look at the causes of suffering. And it insists on a truth that is simple, but not easy. If you want different results, you must plant different causes. That is karma in plain language, cause and effect. Now, when we apply this to the environment, it becomes almost too obvious. If we keep extracting, wasting, and burning as if consequences are not real, then consequences will arrive. They arrive as heat, storms, drought, smoke, sickness, and conflict, not as punishment from the sky, but as reality responding to what we do. So the question becomes, why do we keep doing it if we know it hurts us? Buddhism has a direct answer. The mind is confused. The mind is trained to crave. The mind is trained to avoid discomfort. The mind is trained to cling to identity. And when the mind is trained like that, it will choose short-term comfort, even when long-term harm is obvious. This is why Buddhism and the environment fit together so naturally. Because Buddhism is a training tradition. It trains the mind away from the roots of suffering. When those roots weaken, behavior changes. When behavior changes at scale, systems change. But let us keep it human. Let us not make it a lecture. Let us tell it as a story you can feel. Imagine a small Buddhist community. It is not famous. It is not wealthy. It is a few people who gather for meditation and teachings. They sit, breathe, and try to become kinder. For years they keep practice mostly inside the room. They talk about compassion, interdependence, and non-harming. They leave the room and return to normal habits. Convenience wins. Business win. Nobody feels evil, but nobody is paying attention. Then one day, the community hosts a gathering. People eat, drink, and leave trash behind. Plastic cups, plates, food waste. It is not a mountain, but it is enough to make the floor look like a small disaster. Someone stays late to clean. As they pick up trash, they feel an uncomfortable thought. We just spent hours talking about compassion. Now I am holding the evidence that our compassion did not reach our hands. That person does not blame everyone. They simply bring a question to the next meeting. The question is gentle, but it lands hard. If we practice non-harming, why do we create harm as part of our normal routine? Silence. Some people feel defensive. Some feel guilty. Some feel embarrassed. A few feel irritated. Like, why are you bringing politics into practice? But the teacher does not argue. The teacher just returns to the essence. Practice is not what you say. Practice is what you repeat. That sentence is a mirror. Because what you repeat becomes your karma. And karma becomes your destiny. Individually and collectively. So the community decides to run a simple experiment. Not perfection. Just sincerity. They replace disposables with reusable items. They create a washing routine. They set up clear sorting for recycling and compost. They plan meals to reduce waste. They explain the changes gently to visitors. No scolding. No superiority. Just a calm invitation to participate. At first it feels inconvenient. People complain. Someone forgets. Someone throws things in the wrong bin. Someone says this is too much. But then, something shifts. The inconvenience becomes mindfulness. The small effort becomes a moment of waking up. People start noticing how much waste they used to create without feeling anything. And as they notice, a quiet respect begins to grow. Respect for materials, for food, for water, for the unseen chain of life behind each object. This is one of the biggest keys. You protect what you respect, and you respect what you actually notice. So the first environmental teaching Buddhism offers is attention. Because a distracted mind cannot love deeply. A distracted mind can only consume. Now the story continues. The community begins looking at energy use. Lights left on, heating too high, cooling wasted. Again, nobody meant harm. It was just habit. They set a simple routine. Last person out turns off lights. Thermostat set to a reasonable level. Small upgrades when possible. They treat it not as a money-saving trick, but as mindfulness. And something happens inside the mind when you do this consistently. You start to feel that your life is not separate from consequences. The boundary between inside and outside becomes thinner. You begin to live as if you belong, not as if you are renting reality. This belonging is what some people call the ecological self, the part of you that recognizes you are not an isolated unit. You are breath inside a breathing world. You are water inside the water cycle. You are food inside the food web. You are a human being inside a web of relationships that includes rivers, forests, insects, birds, and future people you will never meet. Buddhist teachings on interdependence are not abstract poetry. They are a direct description of how life works. Nothing stands alone. Everything arises with conditions. When you see that clearly, the idea of harming nature begins to feel like harming your own body. Because in a deep sense, it is. Now let us bring it closer again. Because some viewers will think, okay, a community can do that, but what about me? Living in a city, with school, with stress, with a tight schedule. This is exactly where the path becomes real. Buddhism does not demand that you become perfect. It invites you to become awake where you are. Awake does not mean you never use technology. Awake means you stop being hypnotized by compulsive habits. Awake means you notice craving before it drives you. Awake means you pause before you waste. Awake means you choose with awareness. So let us enter a day in the life of someone practicing Buddhism, and the environment is one path. They wake up. Before the phone, they take one breath and remember interdependence. They remember that the air they inhale came from plants and ocean. That one breath does not fix the planet, but it changes the mind. It changes the starting point. They eat breakfast. They try to waste less. They do not treat food as disposable fuel. They treat food as life that became life. Gratitude arises. Gratitude reduces consumption without force, because when you feel grateful, you do not grab as desperately. They go out. They notice the sky. They notice a tree. Even in a city, life is present. This noticing is not sentimental. It is training attention to meet reality instead of living inside the screen world. They make choices during the day, not dramatic choices. Ordinary ones. Reuse when possible. Repair when possible. Buy less impulsively. Walk when possible. Rest instead of numbing out. Speak kindly instead of spreading stress. Because stress spreads. And stress is also an environmental factor in a social sense. A stressed society consumes more, fights more, and cooperates less. Training the mind is also environmental action because it builds the emotional capacity to cooperate. This is a major point many people miss. Climate work is not only technical, it is also psychological. A community full of anxious, angry, and distracted minds cannot respond wisely to long-term challenges. A community trained in mindfulness, patience, and compassion becomes more resilient. So Buddhism offers environmental resilience by training the mind to stay stable in discomfort. Now let us talk about discomfort, because this is the point where many people quit. Environmental responsibility often asks you to accept some inconvenience. Less impulse buying, more planning, fewer disposables, more walking, more sharing, more repair, more patience. A mind addicted to instant comfort experiences this as suffering. It says, "Why should I suffer?" But Buddhism reframes it. It says, discomfort is already part of life, and we can learn to relate to discomfort with wisdom instead of panic. If you cannot tolerate small discomfort, you will demand large harm. That is a blunt truth. A society that cannot tolerate inconvenience will keep burning the future for comfort. So training discomfort tolerance is not a minor skill. It is a civilization skill. Buddhist practice trains this through mindfulness. You feel discomfort. You breathe. You observe it. And you do not immediately obey it. This reduces impulsively. And impulsivity is one of the engines of overconsumption. Now let us bring in compassion. Because compassion keeps the whole path from becoming cold. Some people try to be environmentally responsible through fear and shame. That becomes harsh quickly. They judge others. They judge themselves. They become rigid. Then, they burn out and quit. Or they become bitter. Buddhist compassion offers another fuel. It says, care because suffering is real. Care because beings matter. Care because you want to reduce harm. Care because you belong to life. This kind of care is warm. It does not require self-hatred. It does not require hating other people. It requires honesty and steadiness. And it includes everyone, including those trapped in difficult systems. Workers, farmers, families under economic pressure, communities with few options. Compassion refuses simple villain stories. It seeks solutions that reduce suffering across the web. Now let us talk about wisdom again. Because wisdom is what makes compassion effective. Wisdom asks, what actually works? Wisdom asks, how do we build systems that make care easy? Wisdom asks, how do we avoid shifting harm elsewhere? Wisdom asks, how do we act without creating new suffering? For example, a community might want to go fully pure overnight. But if that purity creates shame and division, it fails. A wiser approach is steady change that builds participation. This is the middle way again. Not denial, Not perfectionism, not apathy, not fanaticism, steady care. Now I want to tell a longer story that ties these teachings into one arc, because many people need to see how transformation unfolds over time. There is a person named Priya who comes to Buddhist practice because of anxiety. Priya wants peace. Priya earns meditation and for the first time feels a little space in the mind. That space is precious. Priya begins practicing daily. One day Priya goes on a retreat. The retreat center is quiet. Surrounded by trees, Priya experiences a deep calm. Then Priya takes a walk and sees a pile of waste behind a building. Bags, packaging, discarded items. Priya feels a shock. How can a place devoted to peace create this? Priya returns to the meditation hall feeling unsettled. During meditation, the mind keeps returning to the waste. At first Priya thinks this is a distraction. But then Priya realizes it is not random. It is the mind becoming sensitive. It is compassion waking up. Priya speaks with a teacher. The teacher says something simple. When mid-noticed, you begin to see suffering you used to ignore. That is not a problem. That is the path opening wider. Priya begins volunteering with the retreat center. Not as a savior, but as a learner. Priya helps organize waste systems, reduce disposables, improve habits. Priya sees how hard it is to change routines. Priya also sees how powerful small improvements can be. As Priya works, Priya notices something else. The same habits that created waste outside also existed inside Priya. Impulsivity, distraction, craving for convenience, avoidance of discomfort. Working on the outer systems becomes a mirror for the inner training. Priya practices patience while people complain. Priya practices humility when mistakes happen. Priya practices compassion when others are defensive. Priya practices steadiness when progress is slow. Over months, Priya becomes calmer, not because the world becomes easier, but because Priya becomes trained. Then Priya goes home and the practice continues in daily life. Priya consumes less impulsively. Priya wastes less. Priya shares more. Priya listens more. Priya becomes less reactive, which improves relationships. And improved relationships make Priya more stable, which makes sustainable living easier. This is the circle of karma again. Inner causes shape outer action. Outer action shapes inner mind. Now, a year later, Priya is not perfect. But Priya has become a different kind of person. A person who cares steadily. A person who does not collapse into guilt. A person who can face environmental news with grief and still act. A person who can speak about the environment without hatred. A person who can inspire others quietly by example. This is the fruit of practice. Now let us talk about grief. Because any honest conversation about Buddhism and the environment must touch grief. If you are awake, you will feel sorrow about what is happening. That is normal. That is not weakness. That is a sign of connection. But grief can go into direction. One direction is despair. Despair says nothing can change. Despair leads to paralysis. Paralysis is hidden permission for harm to continue. The other direction is tenderness. Tenderness says life matters. Tenderness leads to action. Action may be small, but it is real. Buddhist practice helps move grief toward tenderness by teaching you to hold pain with awareness. You do not drown in it. You do not run from it. You hold it like you would hold a crying child. Steady, present, kind. Then you ask, what is the next wise step? That question turns grief into path. Now we need to address one more trap. The trap of spiritual bypassing. Spiritual bypassing is when someone uses spiritual words to avoid responsibility. They say everything is impermanent. So why care? They say everything is empty. So why act? They say suffering is illusion. So it does not matter. This is misunderstanding. If everything is interdependent, then everything matters. If actions have effects, then care matters. If beings suffer, compassion matters. Buddhism does not teach indifference. It teaches non-attachment. Non-attachment is not caring. Non-attachment is caring without clinging. Acting without ego. Serving without needing guarantees. This is exactly what environmental action needs. Care without burnout. Action without hatred. Responsibility without self-violence. Now I want to bring the whole story to a close by turning it directly toward you. You might be thinking, okay, but the world is huge. The system is big. I am young. Or I am busy. Or I am tired. Here is the most honest response. Yes, the world is huge. That is why your mind must be steady. Because a steady mind can do small things for a long time. And small things done for a long time change culture. Culture changes system. Systems change the future. So the practice is not to do everything. The practice is to do something. Steadily. With a heart that stays open. The practice is to train attention. Because attention is where choice begins. If your attention is constantly stolen, your choices will be driven by craving and pressure. If your attention is trained, your choices will be guided by wisdom and compassion. So Buddhism and the environment meet right here. In the simplest moment, you pause, you breathe, you notice, you choose, you repeat. And the person you become through repeating those choices becomes your destiny. Not only your private destiny, but your shared destiny with everyone who breathes the same air. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Share in the comments what part of environmental care feels hardest for you. Not as shame, but as honest practice. And share one small steady change that you think you can sustain. And if you want more videos that connect wisdom, karma, practice, and the real world, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment to support this community. I will see you in the next one.